talk a little bit about proof of stake and the like, because that's the elephant in the room here.
Mm.
Look, proof of work is an open, competitive, natural system. It emulates Darwinian competition, and it's open. Proof of stake is a closed, controlled system.
Mm-hmm.
And so the problem with a closed, controlled system is it's not Darwinian, and there's no genetic diversity. It becomes inbred.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at, let's take a shoreline, a living shoreline. If you're trying to actually maintain such a thing, the way they engineer it is you would create 200-foot long revetments, and then you would put a break in it for the seawater to come in. And then you create another revetment to protect the shore from the surf. But you always have to have a break for seawater to come in. If you don't leave that channel for seawater to come in, then the water behind the revetment becomes putrid, right? It's pretty, you don't want, you ever seen a putrid standing body of water without any circulation? It breeds bacteria, it becomes infested, it becomes dangerous, it's not healthy. Right. And why? It's closed. It's a closed system. All cities, all civilizations. Why do you build a city on a river? Because you need something to carry the waste away.
Mm-hmm. Right.
What happens if you recirculate your waste in your own, how long can you, recirculate the waste in your spacesuit? How long can you recirculate the water and the waste in your apartment? Well, proof of stake is recirculating itself. And the problem there is, unless you have perfect components and you have, perfect conditions, at some point, either the toxicity of the closed environment destroys the ecosystem, or it becomes so fragile because of the lack of Darwinian competition and the lack of ecological genetic diversity that eventually it dies.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it's like a creature endlessly cloning itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
After you endlessly clone yourself, you're subject to genetic mutations and defects. That's why, every organic creature has sex, right? You actually want to keep mixing the DNA in order to avoid the mutated defects.
Right.
And you can't cleanse yourself. You can't fix the species.
This is like
close the system.
Like a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy. Eventually it gets very blurry, right?
Yeah. And I guess coming back to the other elephant in the room here, Bitcoin is a successful proof of work network that has created our first digital money, our first digital property. Bitcoin has done that. We can see that. There are no successful examples of a proof of stake network succeeding as digital property. That's the elephant in the room. There are no successful proof of stake networks, right? We've never gotten what would be required to be successful. Well, here's a simple one. If the United States government designated a proof of stake network as property and not a security, it's never happened. In fact, the head of the SEC just went on television and said, if there's an ICO and there's a shared enterprise with intent to profit, then it's a security.
Yeah.
So as far as I can see, every proof of stake network that's been launched looks to be, by legal definition, a security, not property. And even Ethereum isn't a proof of stake network. So there's a debate about whether it is property or not, and that'll eventually be resolved, right? But there's absolutely no question that at this point, the only successful digital property that's ever been created in the history of the world was created on a proof of work network.
Right.
There's nothing else. Everything else is just like a garage science experiment or a venture experiment. And on the surface, they all appear to be securities.
Right.
I mean, none of them have successfully decentralized or been embraced as property. And it's not clear whether they can successfully decentralize. I mean, theoretically, new things are possible, but practically speaking, we have one example of crypto property or crypto money.
Yeah.
That is Bitcoin. And everything else is a speculation.
Let me ask you, could we say, it seems to me like central banks in a way are kind of a proof of stake network, where essentially the more gold they have or reserves they're staking, the more interest and inflation revenue they can generate effectively. So
yeah.
Could we say that then a proof of stake network could only really exist because again, there's gold underlying that, a proof of work underlying central banks.
Countries are, currencies are proof of stake. If you own a country, you can designate your currency or your token to be a currency because you make the law.
Right.
So, I mean, that's the case, right? I mean, Venezuela can designate their currency and the US can designate its currency. So you have examples of those systems. They're not crypto proof of stake systems. They're They're fiat.
But they are inherently centralizing, which I don't see why a crypto system would
and they
be
are
different.
centralized.
Yeah.
And they all centralize.
Yeah.
And it seems logical that other stake systems will centralize.
Yeah.
And by the way, centralization is not inherently a vice as long as it's treated as a security.
Mm-hmm.
For example, a publicly traded company that has a stock has a centralized token, that is the stock.
Yes.
But they have obligations to disclose the number of those such tokens to their shareholders, and it's illegal for them to act in a duplicitous, unethical fashion. And it's also illegal for a politician to promote that security because that gives an unfair advantage to one company over another. Right?
Yes.
So if you treat it as a security, then a staked token, is ethical and legal.
Yeah. It could just never work for money.
Yeah, it's not ethical to create private money as a security token and represent that it's property. Right? That's where you're crossing the moral hazard boundary. And so I think the summary here is Bitcoin has created digital money, digital property, if you will, either, on top of a decentralized proof of work network. There are other proof of work networks that are much smaller and less successful, that are less decentralized, that are struggling to a degree, not winning against Bitcoin. And there are other theoretical approaches to creating a decentralized network. None of them have succeeded to date.